Welcome to this episode of Beyond the Clef. I'm your host, David, and I'm here with Robert Herrings. Robert is from Henry Middle School in Leander ISD. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
First off, we're taping this live at the Summer Music Convention in 2017. We're at the Director's Choice booth, and you have just recently gotten some great news.
Yes.
The SMSE Honor Band winner. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. We're very excited.
And tell me how the kids are feeling. How are they reacting to this
They're
right now?
over the moon excited. You know, I sent we have a group chat, and I sent it on the group chat, or Remind, I guess is what it is.
Right.
And we sent it out, and it's just been exploding all day, and my email is nonstop right now from kids and families, and the community is over the moon. So
Wow.
It's really awesome. And I'm so thankful that we're blessed with this opportunity for the third time.
Yeah.
And also that it's so great for Leander ISD too. Right. You know, I just love it. We're such a family in Leander ISD, and that's something that's not everywhere else. So it's really special to share that with everyone.
Well, I'm sure they're very proud of all your accomplishments and your staff and everything like that. So let's talk about our category for today, or our topic for today is what does a UIL judge want to hear? You know, and I guess just in general, how to frame the conversation. When you walk on stage, what are you trying to get across, communicating across to a UIL judge?
You know, I think, you know, and I'm gonna talk about this in a roundabout way.
Okay.
I think about it with priorities in teaching. And one of the things when I go in and out of band halls is I always talk to band directors about having priorities within their, you know, not only in their beginner classes, but also in their ensembles. You know, and I teach the big priorities, tarts, as I call them. And, you know, and I think when a UIL band comes to the stage, you know, what you want to hear is that the director and the students have put forth effort and time to try to have priorities with their ensemble that they are going to demonstrate on the stage. In other words, there's that UIL rubric that's going to give us all of the information that we, you know, for a Division I rating, what are the things that a judge wants to hear, or what should be heard for Division I, Division II, Division III, et cetera, et cetera. For me, I like to think, you know, the number one priority in my world is tone quality. And I would like to hear that bands play with fundamental tone quality. You know, I think there are a lot of misconceptions about tone quality, and a lot of people think that you have to play on the best instrument or the best mouthpiece or the best whatever it is out there to have the best fundamental tone quality. And I disagree with that. I think that it doesn't matter what kind of instrument you're on or the kind of mouthpiece. I think it's all about teaching students the correct way in the setup, and it starts in 6th grade, of how to play with a good sound. You know, what are the fundamentals and the skills that you need to do, and what do you have to do with your face, and what do you have to do with your hands to ensure that you're going to make the best fundamental sound that you can. Now, let's be real, they're middle school kids, and we know that sometimes in middle school, they don't always make the sound like a senior in high school is going to make. And that's not the goal, to make a middle school band sound like a high school band, but you want them to come to the stage where they have an understanding of tone quality. So that's my first of the T of tarts.
And we had a great conversation yesterday with Corey Graves, a good friend of both of ours.
Yes.
When we were sitting around at Tech Band Camp, and one thing that he was talking about was just that in 6th grade, we really delved into how do you make those children sound like, he called it pro playing.
Yeah.
How do you make them sound like pro playing? And it all starts with getting that fundamental there.
Yep.
And he really didn't mention anything about the instrument. And so that's really interesting that you think, so your take is the person is the main goal of what we're doing.
Well, I think it's also really important, too, that students are placed on the right instrument. And I know that there are so many schools of thought out there about placing kids on instruments. I think it's really important, not to say that someone who really wants to play trombone can't really play trombone if they don't really put their heart to it. No, that's not what I'm saying. But when they're starting and it's in a class setting where you have 45 minutes a day where you're working with this kid, or sometimes 30 minutes a day in some situations are set up where they have beginners every other day. You know, you want to try to put the kid on the instrument that they're going to be the most successful on from the beginning, so that they have more success right from the start. So overbites and underbites and size of lips and body size and how long are your arms and how all of those things are so important, I feel, you know, when placing kids on instruments so that they can be successful right from the very beginning. And then, you know, talking about instruments in general, you know, everybody wants their kid to play on, you know, an E11 clarinet or an R13 or whatever the case may be, you know, but I do truly believe that kids can still learn, because remember, it's not the instrument that is making that's making the sound.
Right.
It's all about what the embouchure is doing and what the hand positions are doing,
right,
and the kind of air and the direction in which the air is going.
Right.
So I think that, you know, tone quality is so important. overall, but I don't think it's just based on what kind of instrument you're on, or it's all about the setup from the beginning.
Well, and I'm really excited in the future. Let's go ahead and have an entirely different episode about placing kids on instruments.
Yes,
I'd love
would
to
love
hear
that.
That would be. I'm looking forward to that. So you keep on mentioning this word tarts.
Yes. So the second.
So and explain first. Go back. What do you mean by that?
Tarts. So it's tone, articulation, rhythm, technique, and style.
Okay, and keep on going on that. I
there's my
you.
tone. No, it's okay.
Okay.
So there's my tone. So now talking about articulation, and I believe that there are just some, everybody do, a lot of programs do the articulation exercise. I do believe that some people just go through the exercise and they don't really work on the exercise. And for someone to be able to teach articulation well, you have to understand articulation. And the only way you're going to understand articulation is to study articulation and to put the instrument in your mouth or on your face and try to articulate the way you want them to articulate. And articulation is tough. And on single reed instruments, it can be really tough. Clarinet and saxophone, those are hard instruments to get the correct articulation on. Brass players can articulate better and firmer quicker than like a woodwind player can on like saxophone or clarinet. So just when a UIL band comes to the stage, sometimes you got to remember the judge is sitting far away from the ensemble, and this is what I tell people when I go in their band halls. If you're in your band hall and it sounds over articulate in your band hall, when you get to the stage, what is being portrayed in the music will be articulate out into the audience. And it's just like when we speak. If you don't articulate your consonants, no one truly understands what you're saying. And so I think that's super important for a UIL judge, because they want to hear articulation that the director understands, like that's the music that's on the page, and we're articulating that rhythm that's there because that is what the composer wanted. Rhythms, I am always shocked when bands come to the stage and they play incorrect rhythms. And, some of the hardest rhythms are dotted 8/16ths and dotted quarter eighths. The 8th note is always in the wrong place, or the 16th note is swung in the dotted 8/16th, right? So truly understanding rhythm is a foundation, or is a fundamental to being successful on your instrument and playing music well.
And the same thing translates to 6/8 too.
Exactly.
I feel like it's the opposite problem.
You're absolutely right. And so I think rhythm, having that basic understanding of rhythm truly helps the kids not only on the stage, but then when they get in the sight reading room, which I think we may talk about later on, but when they get in the sight reading room, if they don't understand rhythms, how do they understand how to put their part in time in the room to be successful? Whether the director has 7 or 8 minutes to speak or not, they have to understand their part and their role and how music fits together. Then there's technique. Once you play with a good sound, and you have great articulation, and you articulating rhythms, and you understand rhythms, now it comes to technique, executing all the technique that's on the page. And I feel like sometimes bands come to the stage and they play music that is not, they don't play all the correct technique. They don't finish the phrase, they don't play all the 60th notes, it's not clean, and that takes time, and I feel like sometimes directors feel like they don't have enough time because they feel the pressure of the calendar, and they're worried about UIL, and we all have like star testing dates in the middle and field trips and these kind of things that we're always worried about. So I always encourage directors, like, truly, when you think about your UIL program, think about music that is going to be accessible to your kids, and music that that you're going to be able to get taught and cleaned in a way that when you go to UIL, it is a finished product that's on the stage. Once you get through with your technique, then you go into style, and I believe that every piece has style. Some directors teach style, some do not. I think when you play a march, there's definitely a march style that should be played, and when you play lyrically, there's definitely a lyrical style.
And hearing your band play Washington Post, you can tell. Was it Washington Post?
It was Washington,
yeah. I could really tell right off the bat, March, the style that you imparted to the audience.
Mm-hmm. And style is super important, and it also it helps tell the story, and it also helps portray what the intent of the composer was at that time. So my tarts, as I talk about all the time, even with my beginners, I talk about them with my band, I talk about them with the schools that I go to and visit. I think priorities, and sometimes people don't have priorities. And as a UIL judge, when I'm sitting in the audience and at the table, I just want to hear that a band has priorities. And maybe that year, it was a different year for them, and their only priority was to improve the tone quality of the ensemble. That's okay. Just select music that is appropriate for the level of kid that you're working with.
It's really interesting too, just looking at the priorities that you laid down. they're actually in chronological order as I'm kind of, when you start to go through these, as I'm kind of seeing it, because the first thing you really work on is the embouchure, is the tone, and then you go into, and so as you're going through, you're thinking of this chronologically. Now, of course, there's layering, there's always reinforcement, and that happens too. But that's really opening my eyes to seeing it as a going up the hill of this priority list.
Well, and I think everything that we do, we should think backwards. And I talk about planning backwards all the time. Think what's the end, and where do you have to start to get there? And I think so many times people, and not to get off of our topic, but to get back, so many times people forget that 6th grade is where it all begins. That's going to affect your ensemble in 7th and 8th grade. And remember, whatever happens in 6th grade, you're going to deal with for the next 2 years in 7th and 8th grade. And then they're going to go on to high school, and your high school directors are going to deal with that, on the high school level. The other thing about UIL that I think people make the mistake of doing is they select literature that they just like. I really like this piece, so I'm going to play it. And they don't stop to think about what is the best literature for the student that I have seated in front of me. What are the capabilities of my ensemble? And are we going to be able to achieve these goals and push these kids to a place where we need them to be to make this music, to play it respectably, and for it to be a Division I rating, at UIL contests, where the kids are not being pushed past their ability level, but also they're challenged at the same time. And I think some directors do find themselves in a struggling situation, especially if I have really good woodwinds and really weak brass. They're torn. Like, well, where do I go? How do I select music for that? Well, that is tough, but you try to find music that is going to challenge your students, but is still attainable. And sometimes I think people forget that it's okay to not always pick, just because you have great trumpets doesn't mean you pick something that's all about the trumpets, but it has a woodwind part that your woodwinds can't play. But just because you have great trumpets, don't pick that piece, and you hear that a lot, seated in the audience. You just go, okay, well, obviously they had really good trumpets, and that's the reason they picked this piece of music, but everybody else can't play it. And so you have to find music that fits the entire ensemble, and I think individuals forget that. Then there's also the tuning thing that everyone struggles with. And I know that everybody struggles with tuning. Tuning is hard, and there are many schools of thought on tuners and pickups. There are many schools of thought of when to use them and how to use them. I truly believe that bands should use tuners as a tool and not as, it's not their crutch, it's a tool. Teach the students how to use the tuner and pickup, and then when they know how to use it, then it's just a tool. It's not a crutch for them anymore. And while it may still be plugged in and on their stand, they're not looking at it the whole time. There's no way possible they can look at it the whole time, because there's so many other things going on that they utilize that when they need to, especially when you do like tuning between pieces, and those kind of things for those individual bands that do that kind of stuff on stage.
Now let's talk about a panic moment that I had in the past with tuning. Warm-up room, really hot, stage really cold, or vice versa. What do you do in that situation?
Well, I try to train my students to always use their ears and listen, no matter what. And the temperature, actually, believe it or not, in our band hall changes a lot. So one of the things we talk about our students is use your ears. If it doesn't sound right, automatically assume that you are the guilty one, and try to do something to make a change. Now, I always tune in the warm-up room, and then when we get to the stage before we play, I always give the kids 30 seconds on their own on the stage, but they have been trained of what to do, and that's something that a lot of directors don't do. They give their kids 30 seconds on the stage, and it's like chaos.
You're hearing Go Big Blue or
yeah,
whatever.
Exactly. Land of a Thousand Dances. It's just like, it's crazy. Teach your kids what you want them to do in that 30 seconds so that they understand how to tune when you get to the stage, and treating them how to use their ear so that when they are in those situations, they know how to adjust and how to listen. I think another thing that helps with tuning too is understanding ensemble. And a lot of times when you hear bands on the UIL stage, you can tell that the students or the director do not truly understand ensemble. And as a first year teacher for myself, I didn't know true ensemble coming out of college. I just didn't. But I had great mentors along the way that helped me understand, and I listened to a lot of reference recordings throughout. I'm one of those people that just listens to recordings all the time, and I go, oh, that's what it's supposed to sound like. That's what a flow bow net sounds like, And so I think that having a basic understanding of what the ensemble should sound like and where kids should listen at certain times, and when they're the melody and when they're not, and when to get out of the way and when to be present, those are the skills that we have to teach our students, and those are the skills that you have to get them to understand inside your band hall. And when they can do that in the band hall, then it will be great on the stage. One of the things that I encourage everybody to do, and we do a lot on my campus, is record. We record our rehearsals every day, and you know what? At the beginning of the year, it's painful. It's painful to listen to, but if you can get those kids to sound great on an Edirol recording in your band hall, when they get to the stage, it's going to be brilliant. And I think many people are afraid to hear what it sounds like, so they don't do those things. But I think that is a direct reflection of what happens on the stage. If you can get it right in the band hall, they're going to translate. Because remember, when students get nervous, and even when directors get nervous in a situation, you revert back to what you're comfortable and what you're comfortable with. And what they're comfortable with is being in the band hall. And what was it like in the band hall? Well, if they do what it was like in the band hall, it's going to be great because that's what they're trained to do when they get.
And I feel like recording yourself every day is a really good technique, a defense mechanism for young teachers. One thing that I did, and I figured out really early on from a great colleague, was record your rehearsals every day and do that, and then go and listen, make your notes, and that'll help you formulate your plan.
Yep.
Otherwise, if you go on your memory, you're just going on your own self-consciousness and whatnot, and this was weak, and this kid was being a jerk at this moment. But if you go into that recording, you think, oh, wow, all of a sudden the oboe was really crazy right here, or the clarinets weren't even listening in this part. You don't hear those because you're focused on what you're doing, or maybe even how you're doing in the moment.
In the moment, yeah. And I believe that recording your ensemble is a great way to plan. And I think planning is a whole different topic that we could talk about on another, podcast, but planning is important. And having those recordings is a great way to help you plan so that you plan for success of the ensemble. And let me tell you, standing on the podium, you cannot hear everything. You think you hear everything, but I can't tell you how many times I'm like, oh, it was such a great rehearsal. It was awesome. It was great. And then I go, oh my goodness, what were the horns doing? But again, I wasn't over there by the horns. And when you're standing on the podium and you're teaching, you're going to miss a lot. I do think people should get inside of their ensembles more and teach from within the ensemble. And I know we have metronomes that run and those type of things, and I'm the biggest offender of talking over the metronome. And I've always been told, never talk over the metronome, stop the metronome, stop. But when you're in the middle of your ensemble and no one's there, you don't have an assistant at that time because maybe they're helping another student and the metronome is going, I'm gonna talk over the metronome. But I think it's important to get inside of the ensemble because that's when you hear more that you didn't hear when you were standing on the podium. And remember, it's not, your top players are gonna sound great and all that stuff's gonna work itself out. It's the meat and what's happening in the middle to the bottom of the ensemble that you have to get really worked out. And when you can take care of the bottom of the ensemble, the entire ensemble is going to sound really, really good. Because your top players are going to do things on a different level than the kids at the bottom of your ensemble. That doesn't mean they're not all talented. It's just that they get some things better than some of the other students. And so be inside of the ensemble and be a more active listener, throughout your rehearsal time. And that helps, when they're preparing for UIL as well. And again, I can't say enough, pick appropriate literature. And it's hard for me because everyone says things like, I say that to people and then I get this. Well, you play things like Armenian dances. And I go, yes, but I also knew that I had an ensemble that could play that piece. And I also, whenever I pick music, I try to be smart about what I pair with it. I want to have everything have substance, but sometimes people just pick a bunch of hard music that they can't play and they'll never be able to achieve in that time, and then they stress out and then they beat their kids down because the kids aren't able to achieve, but it was just out of their control.
Speaking of Armenian, I have to give a shout out to your oboe player.
Oh,
hearing
that kid is great.
please tell him or her, fantastic.
Luke Hatch, he's great. He has a fabulous future ahead of him.
Fantastic, yes. And there's so many talented musicians I got to hear in that recording. I'm really happy I got to hear it. Talking about programming, talk to me about, there's a traditional format, more or less, of a march, a lyrical, and a technical. We'll just say those broad terms. And a lot of that mixes together. Talk about your thoughts on those things and their relationship and how you program for a UIL stage performance.
Well, I think a march, you need to pick a standard march that is going to challenge your brass. I love that because when most marches are about brass anyway. There's your traditional marches, let me say that.
Right.
Traditional marches are, brass heavy. I think it's really important that you have a march that is going to teach the kids about style and articulation. And marches, I think, should be taught first in your UIL prep because I think that's really important because when they can do all of the things in the march and when they're approaching those, when you get to your other pieces of music, all of that stuff translates so much quicker than trying to get it whenever you're trying to get into your technical aspect of your technical piece. Lyrical pieces are what I call, it's that black and white area. Some ensembles are ready for a lyrical piece of music. And you can play a big lyrical piece like Sheltering Sky or Australian Upcountry Tune or something like. They're ready for a lyrical piece of that nature. I think sometimes people pick a lyrical piece just because they think they should play a lyrical piece. And if your ensemble is not ready and you haven't played anything lyrically all year long, then you should not play lyrical music for UIL because you haven't given the kids a fair opportunity to develop that skill. Lyrical playing is important because they need to learn how to play that way, but if they're not ready, don't play a lyrical piece. You can play a work that has a lyrical section in it. And I think that's smart, especially if you have a band that's like, okay, well, we're kind of there, we're doing a good job on our lyrical stuff, but we're not ready for a 3.5, 4 minute lyrical piece of music. We'll give them that 1.5 minutes of lyrical playing. That way you demonstrate to the judges that, like, yes, the kids
you're working on.
It's a work in progress, but the kids still have done a great job and they've gotten this far and they understand lyrical playing to this point. It's a project for us, so we're moving forward on that, but here's where we are now. And so I think that's super important.
And I feel like that's definitely important for a second or third developing group, developing their skills.
And I don't think third bands should play lyrically. I think third bands should play music that is going to develop the skills of their ensemble. If you have a third ensemble, we love those kids, and there's nothing wrong with them, and they're in band too, and they're the kids that are going to stick around, but you want to pick music that is attainable for them, assess the ensemble skills, modify for their achievement, and then they'll be successful. And I think that's where a lot of people make mistakes in the third band realm of music picking. With non-varsity bands, some non-varsity bands are ready for lyrical, some are not. And when I say lyrical, pick a piece that is flowing. Something that keeps moving. It's not going 46 beats a minute or 60 beats a minute. It's going 90 beats a minute. Something that is still where they're able to move air and continue to make good sounds, and that they're able to achieve the goals that the music is trying to achieve. And then when you pick that technical piece, everybody likes the cool stuff. The cool stuff is hard. Now there are lots of baby pieces out there that are so cute and really challenging in their own right. That are fun and good music that kids love. When you get to the upper level of music, your grade 4s, your grade 5s, those things are tough. So you have to be smart about what music you pick based on the technical demands that your ensemble can play. And if you haven't worked on technique in your daily drill throughout the year, then I do not feel that you should play something that's truly very technical. Because if you haven't set the kids up for success, then don't put them in a situation where they're going to be unsuccessful. So I think music selection is always tough. I like to pick music, or I like people to pick music that complements. Like you hear your march, and then after your march, you want something that complements the march. And then after the march, what complements the second tune? When you pick your third tune, so that it's a package when you put it together and you present. You're presenting a package to the stage, not just like, I chose 3 individual pieces of music that I really like, but they don't really complement each other in any way or go together in any way. And programming is hard, and a lot of people struggle with programming.
Now, this is a whole nother topic in itself that we could have many episodes on. But let's transition over to sight reading. And there's all the preparation and whatnot that's going in months and months and years in advance to make sight reading happen. What are you thinking when you get into the sight reading room? What are you trying to impart short term to the judges?
That my students have a basic understanding of reading music and can play with a fundamental sound. I think the biggest mistake I think directors get nervous in the sight reading room, and so they forget to address their ensemble. Know your ensemble. And a judge can tell from the podium, from the judging table, if the director on the podium truly understands their ensemble or not. There are certain things that whenever I'm in the sight reading room that I don't address, or I do address it, but I talk about it very briefly because I already know that my students have been trained in those skills, and that's the expectation that they are going to demonstrate those skills because we've worked on the sight reading process for so long. And it doesn't just start when they get in 7th grade. We start working on sight reading when they're in 6th grade and they're learning beginner lines. We're teaching them, we assign them lines, and you go home and learn that line tonight, and you come back, and then, or we flip to it and I go, okay, let's turn to line 17. Let's read it. Everybody gets 30 seconds. Here we go. And then when you make a mistake, you stop playing, and then that way you're training those kids right from the very beginning to use all of the skills that they have and all the tools that they have in their bag to be successful in the moment and in that 8 bars that they're playing, when they're reading a line. So to a UIL judge, I want to understand, or I want them to demonstrate to me that their students understand music, they understand ensemble, and they understand how to play with a good sound at all times. Now music, sight reading pieces, and again, this could be a whole nother topic because sometimes you have sight reading pieces that I feel is unfair to students. And students don't. Where's the melody? Well, that's the director's job to tell them. But let there be a true melody because students are used to playing true melodies. So in the sight reading room, there needs to be true melodies that are being played because that is what students are used to. So as a UIL judge, I just want to know that these kids understand how to play in an ensemble, how to play with a good sound, and how to understand reading rhythms and counting reps. Because really, and I always tell my students, sight reading is a game. How many of you play video games? They all raise their hand. It's a game, and there's always a trap.
Yeah.
And you have to be smarter than the average bear. And they're going to put something there to try to trip you up, but you have to be smarter than that music so that you don't fall in those traps. And then at the very end, we celebrate together because we all started together and ended together, and it was great in the middle. Yes, we want to hear dynamics, and we want to hear, phrasing, and we want to hear, we don't want kids breathing every 4 bars. I want to hear that they understand phrasing, and I want to hear that they understand, how whenever it's a woodwind choir, who the melody is and how I should fit my part inside. And those kind of things. And when it's a brass choir or when it's woodwinds with trumpets playing, that the woodwinds understand, like when it's not a woodwind moment, I'm listening back for the trumpets because that's where I want to fit my sound. Those are the skills that as a judge, I want to hear that those kids have been trained to do. In the defense of a lot of directors, some of them just don't know those things yet. Younger directors just don't. And that's why I encourage everyone to have mentors. And I know it's changed a lot over the years because back in the day, there were not a lot of mentors going out into band halls and band directors were figuring it out on their own, But now we are in an age where we are fortunate to be surrounded by so many great mentors that there are people out there that will come in and help you that are not there to judge and that are not there to walk away and talk about you when it's all over with. They're there to help. And you just have to listen to those people to help you get through that. But again, sight reading starts in the beginner years. You got to start it in 6th grade because if they don't understand how to sight read in 6th grade, when you get in 7th and 8th grade, they're never going to be able to do it.
So wrapping up here, how does this differ with a UIL judge and an honor band judge? Most of this is the same, but how do you feel when you're doing those two things? How do you think? What are the differences?
I think there are some differences and similarities. I think a lot of it is, when I'm judging, and I'll be honest, when I judge an area, that I am listening for priorities. And I know it's hard. Recording quality is really important. And sometimes you have a great balanced ensemble, but you had a recording engineer that didn't have the best equipment, so it didn't come across in the recording in the way that you had worked on it, or the stage is weird, or whatever the case may be. As an honor band judge, I am listening for that the ensemble that I'm listening to, do they have priorities, and are they, like we were playing Granger, are they truly getting the Grangerisms that are written for this piece? Did they do their research on why this piece was written, and what are the things that we're listening for, and can you tell that they may have had a reference recording to use as something that they based their oral image of that was going to be? I think those are the kind of things that I listen for, and I listen for overall ensemble. And do they play in tune? Like, those are the things that I want to hear. Is it a good band that can articulate? Do they have priorities? There are my tarts again. Yep. I teach with, I always listen for tarts. Do they have that? So I think they're the same and different. I may have not really answered that question because for me, I kind of feel like it's almost the same in its own way. It's just that now you're ranking bands against each other instead of judging that band for individually what that band is. Because I think, like, even in the Triple C room this year, honestly, every band in there could have been an honor band. It was great, and I knew, I kept thinking, man, if I were a judge, I would not want to be judging this right now because all these bands are spectacular. And I think that's what makes it really tough for a judge in the honor band process, is that a lot of times you are listening to a slew of great bands, and you're just like, what do I like the best? I do also, with honor band, listen for programming. Did they pick a smart program that complements each other? And I like to think, old and new. Give us a little bit of old, give us a little bit of something new, and give us something standard, and then it's a good product. You show that they can play all across the board, with their programming. So that's kind of how I approach it whenever I'm judging, the honor band process.
Thank you so much for coming on. Again,
thank you for having
congratulations to you and your staff
Thank
and
you.
your kids and your community on another great achievement with the Henry Middle School Band. I almost said Henry High School Band. With the Henry Middle School Band. We're so happy to have you on and Beyond the Clef, and we hope to get you on soon because I've written down so many great topics that we're going to have to talk about in the future.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
I appreciate it.